kind nurse volunteers at shelter. A decade later, receives a heartwarming thank you from a rescued teen who changes her life. The storm raged outside the youth shelter, its heavy rain pounding against the windows like a frantic heartbeat. Elowen Hartley stood at the entrance, her heart racing. She took a deep breath, the scent of wet pavement mingling with the musty air of the building. This was her first night as a nurse and caretaker, and the weight of her new role pressed down on her shoulders. What if she wasn't enough? What if she couldn't help the lost and broken kids inside? As she stepped through the door, a chill ran down her spine. The dim light cast shadows across the room, revealing a group of teenagers huddled together, their faces a mix of curiosity and wariness. Elowen's gaze landed on a boy sitting alone in the corner, his dark hair falling over his eyes. He looked like he was trying to disappear into the wall. She felt a pull towards him, sensing the pain wrapped tightly around his heart. "Hey there," Elowen said softly, her voice barely rising above the storm outside. "I'm Elowen. I'll be here to help you all." The boy didn't look up. Instead, he traced a finger along the edge of the table, lost in his thoughts. Elowen felt a pang of sympathy. She knew that kind of sorrow all too well. It reminded her of her own struggles, of the loss that had shaped her life. "Is your name Jackson?" she asked gently, hoping to break through his silence. He finally met her gaze, his eyes dark and stormy like the night outside. "Why do you care?" he shot back, his voice a mix of anger and hurt. Elowen's heart ached at his words. "Because I know what it feels like to hurt," she replied, her voice steady. "And I want to help." Jackson looked away, but she could see the flicker of interest in his eyes. She took a step closer, keeping her tone warm and inviting. "Everyone here has a story, and I want to hear yours when you're ready." The storm continued to rage, but inside, a quiet moment formed between them. Elowen felt a spark of hope ignite within her. She made a silent vow then and there. She would care for each young person in this shelter. They deserved more than just physical healing. They needed emotional support, understanding, and someone to believe in them. As Elowen moved through the shelter, she observed the other kids, each lost in their own world. Some were laughing, while others stared out the windows, their eyes distant. She remembered her own past, the moments that had driven her to this point. It wasn't just a job, it was a calling. She had to make a difference, even if it was just for one person. "What if I can't do it?" she whispered to herself, doubt creeping in. But then she thought of Jackson. His pain resonated with her own, and she realized that every small act of kindness could matter. "Excuse me," a voice broke through her thoughts. Elowen turned to see a girl with bright red hair and a fierce expression. "Do you really think you can help us?" Elowen smiled, feeling the weight of the question. "I believe that everyone deserves a chance to heal, and I'm here to help you find that path." "Good luck with that," the girl replied, crossing her arms defiantly. Elowen felt a mix of determination and fear. "I know it won't be easy," she said, her voice firm, "but I'm not going anywhere." As she settled into her new role, Elowen sensed the storm outside beginning to calm, mirroring the stirring hope within her. She had made a promise to herself and to these kids. They might not trust her yet, but she would be there every step of the way, ready to listen, to care, and to help them find their way through the darkness. In that moment, surrounded by the fragile hearts of the youth in the shelter, Elowen Hartley felt a flicker of hope. It was the beginning of a journey, not just for them, but for her as well. A journey that would bind their lives in ways they had yet to understand. Elowen Hartley spent her days at the youth shelter trying to connect with the young residents. Each morning, she would arrive with a smile, bringing books and art supplies. She believed that through stories and creativity, she could help them heal. The shelter, with its worn walls and bright murals, was a safe place where the youth could express themselves. One afternoon, Elowen gathered a small group of teens in the common room. She held up a book filled with colorful illustrations. "Today, we are going to read together," she announced, her voice warm and inviting. The teenagers glanced at each other, unsure. They had been through so much, and trusting someone new was not easy. Jackson, sitting in the corner with his arms crossed, watched the others. He had a heavy heart, and the thought of sharing it with anyone made him anxious. Elowen noticed him and approached slowly. "Would you like to join us, Jackson?" she asked softly. He shook his head, his dark hair falling into his eyes. "No thanks. I don't want to," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Elowen respected his choice, but felt a pang of sadness. She knew that behind his tough exterior, there was a boy who needed to be heard. Later that week, Elowen decided to try something different. She set up an art project, hoping to engage the teens through their creativity. "Let's create something that represents who we are," she encouraged. "You can use any colors you like." She handed out paintbrushes and paper, her enthusiasm brightening the room. As Elowen moved around the room, she noticed Jackson still sitting alone. She walked over to him, her heart open. "What if we paint together?" she suggested, holding out a brush. "You can show me your ideas." Jackson stared at the brush, then at the paper. After a moment, he reluctantly took the brush. "Fine," he mumbled. Elowen smiled, grateful for this small step. As they painted, Jackson began to open up. He painted a dark storm cloud in one corner of the page. "This is me," he said, his voice low, always angry and sad. Elowen nodded, encouraging him to continue. "And what about over here?" she asked, pointing to the empty space. Jackson hesitated, then added a bright sun in the opposite corner. "This is what I wish I could feel," he admitted, his eyes downcast. "But it's hard." Elowen felt a rush of empathy for him. She wanted to help him find that warmth in his heart. "Sometimes it's hard for me too," she shared gently. "I lost someone I loved, and it took time to heal. But I believe we can find light again." Jackson looked up, surprised. "You lost someone?" he asked. His curiosity piqued. "Yes," Elowen replied, her voice steady. "My sister. She was my best friend, and I felt lost without her. But I learned that it's okay to feel sad. It's part of healing." Jackson studied her face, searching for sincerity. "How did you get through it?" he asked, his tone softening. "I surrounded myself with people who cared about me. I talked to them, painted, and found new things to enjoy. It wasn't easy, but I started to feel better," she explained. For the first time, Jackson looked vulnerable. He took a deep breath and picked up his brush again. "I want to try," he said, his determination shining through. Elowen smiled, feeling a connection forming between them. As the weeks passed, Jackson continued to share his art and feelings. Each session brought new challenges, but also moments of laughter and understanding. The other teens began to join in too, feeling encouraged by Jackson's openness. One day, Jackson surprised Elowen by bringing in a childhood drawing. It showed him, his parents, and his younger sister, all smiling in a park. "I made this when I was happy," he said, his voice shaking. "I don't feel like that anymore." Elowen took a moment to absorb the drawing. "This is beautiful, Jackson. It shows how much you loved your family," she said, her voice full of warmth. He nodded slowly, tears filling his eyes. "I miss them. I don't know how to be okay," he confessed. Elowen felt a rush of compassion. "It's okay to miss them," she reminded him. "You can carry their love with you. It helps to talk about it. I'm here for you." Jackson looked at her, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "You really mean that?" he asked, vulnerability clear in his voice. "Of course I do," Elowen replied firmly. "You are not alone in this." In that moment, something shifted between them. Jackson began to see Elowen not just as a caretaker, but as a friend who understood his pain. With each shared story, they built a bridge of trust. Elowen realized that her presence was a source of hope for the youth at the shelter, igniting a passion within her to advocate for their well-being. As the chapter of their lives unfolded, Elowen and Jackson began to uncover the healing power of connection, one brushstroke at a time. Elowen Hartley walked through the shelter with a heavy heart. The warmth of the shared spaces did little to ease the chill she felt inside. Over the past weeks, she had noticed things that made her uneasy. It was not just the usual struggles of the teens. There were whispers of danger, shadows of abuse lurking just beneath the surface. Each day, she heard bits and pieces, stories of exploitation that sent shivers down her spine. One afternoon, as she sat in the common area, Jackson joined her. He had been quieter than usual, his eyes holding a mix of fear and anger. Elowen sensed something was wrong. "Jackson," she said gently, "is everything okay?" He hesitated, looking down at his hands. "I don't know, Elowen. I overheard some guys talking. They said they would come back for me." His voice was barely a whisper. Elowen felt her stomach drop. "What do you mean? Who are these guys?" I think they know about my past. They think they can use me," Jackson admitted, his voice shaking. Elowen's heart raced. She had seen too many young people fall into the wrong hands. "Jackson, you have to tell me everything. We need to protect you." He looked up at her, his eyes wide with fear. "But what if they find out I told you? What if they come after me?" "I promise I will do everything I can to keep you safe," she said, trying to sound reassuring. "But we have to be honest. Can you trust me?" After a long pause, Jackson nodded slowly. "Okay, but I'm scared." Elowen reached out and squeezed his hand. "You're not alone in this. We will figure it out together." As they talked, Elowen's mind raced with the gravity of the situation. She had a duty to report anything that could endanger the kids, but she also felt a fierce need to protect them. The system was supposed to help, but it often failed those it aimed to protect. Later that evening, Elowen sat alone in her small office, her mind filled with concern. She remembered the stories of other teens who had fallen through the cracks. The system often seemed more like a cage than a safety net. Would reporting Jackson's fears put him in more danger? Her heart ached as she weighed her options. "What should I do?" she muttered to herself. "If I report it, will he be safe? Or will it only make things worse?" The decision felt like a heavy stone in her chest. Elowen leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. She knew she had to act, but the thought of betraying Jackson's trust frightened her. The next day was filled with tension. Elowen decided to talk to the shelter director, hoping for guidance. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Of course, Elowen. What's on your mind?" the director replied, noticing her unease. "It's about Jackson. He overheard something that concerns me. I'm worried he might be in danger," Elowen explained, her heart racing. The director frowned, crossing her arms. "We take these matters seriously, but you know the policies. If we report it, we may not be able to keep him here." "But what if he gets hurt?" Elowen pressed, desperation creeping into her voice. "Sometimes the best we can do is provide a safe space, but it's not easy," the director replied, her tone firm yet sympathetic. Elowen felt the weight of her decision pressing down harder. "I don't want to fail him," she whispered. Later that evening, she found herself in front of Jackson again. "I spoke to the director," she said, her voice steady but soft. "There are steps we can take, but I need to know you'll be safe." Jackson looked at her, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "What does that mean for me?" "It means we can work together to find a way through this. I'll do everything I can to help," Elowen assured him. As they sat together, the shadows of abuse loomed over them. But in that moment, Elowen felt a flicker of hope. She realized that even the smallest steps could lead to a safer path for Jackson and the other teens. She was determined to fight for them, but the battle ahead would test her resolve in ways she could never have imagined. Elowen Hartley stood in the large hall, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. It had been a decade since she had left the youth shelter, but the memories of that place still held a significant place in her heart. The walls were adorned with bright banners and photographs of the young people she had cared for, each image telling a story of hope and resilience. Today was not just an event, it was a chance to give back to the community that had shaped her life. As she checked the arrangements for the charity event, Elowen felt the weight of her past. "I hope this event helps them," she whispered to herself, adjusting a tablecloth. She wanted to raise enough funds to provide better resources and support for the young residents still at the shelter. Though her career had changed over the years, her passion for helping others remained strong. The guests began to arrive, filling the room with laughter and chatter. Elowen greeted them with a warm smile, but her mind wandered back to the young faces she had once cared for. Among her thoughts, one face stood out: Jackson. She wondered if he would come. They had shared so much during their time at the shelter, and she often thought about how he was doing. Just as Elowen was lost in thought, she heard a familiar voice call out her name. She turned to see Jackson standing at the entrance, looking more grown up than she remembered. His hair was longer, and his posture was more confident, but the spark of recognition in his eyes brought back a flood of emotions. "Elowen," he exclaimed, walking toward her with a smile that lit up the room. "It's been too long." Elowen's heart swelled with happiness. "Jackson, I can't believe it's you. You look amazing." She stepped forward to embrace him, feeling the warmth of their connection once again. "I had to come. I heard about the event, and I knew I wanted to see you," Jackson replied, his voice filled with sincerity. "You made such a difference in my life." Elowen felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. "It was you who inspired me, Jackson. Seeing you grow and find your strength was one of the greatest joys of my life." As they spoke, the room began to fill with more guests, and the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Elowen took a moment to gather her thoughts before stepping onto the stage. She was about to share her journey and the purpose of the event with everyone present. "Welcome, everyone," Elowen started, her voice steady. "Thank you for being here today. This event is not just about raising funds, it's about the lives we can touch and the hope we can provide to those in need." Jackson watched from the sidelines, feeling a swell of pride for Elowen. He knew how much she cared. After her speech, Elowen invited Jackson to join her on stage. "I would like to introduce someone who means a lot to me," she said, gesturing for him to come forward. As Jackson stepped up, the audience fell silent, their attention focused on him. He took a deep breath, his heart racing. "Hi everyone, I'm Jackson," he began, his voice firm yet warm. "I want to share a bit about my journey. When I was at the shelter, I was lost and angry, but Elowen saw me. She cared for me when I didn't even care for myself." Tears welled in Elowen's eyes as she listened. Jackson continued, "With her support, I learned to face my pain. She taught me that it's okay to ask for help. Because of her, I found my voice." The audience listened intently, feeling the weight of Jackson's words. Elowen could see their emotions mirrored in their expressions. "I want to give back, just like she did for me," Jackson concluded. "We can all make a difference." The applause that followed was thunderous. Elowen stepped forward, wrapping her arms around Jackson in a tight embrace. "Thank you," she whispered, overwhelmed with emotion. As the event went on, Elowen felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that together they could bring hope and change to many more lives. The warmth of their reunion and the power of their shared experiences reminded her that love and support could change the world, one heart at a time. Elowen stood in the spotlight, her heart racing as she watched Jackson step up to the microphone. The charity event buzzed with energy, filled with faces eager to hear his story. As he began to speak, Elowen felt a mix of pride and anxiety. She remembered the young boy who had walked into the shelter, lost and broken. Now, he was a young man, ready to share his journey with the world. "Thank you all for being here," Jackson started, his voice steady, yet filled with emotion. "I want to tell you about a person who changed my life." He paused, scanning the audience for familiar faces. Elowen felt her breath catch as he looked directly at her. Her name is Elowen Hartley. A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd, and Elowen's cheeks flushed. She had never sought the spotlight. She preferred the quiet moments with the teens, the ones where she could offer her support without recognition. But here she was, the center of attention, and it felt overwhelming. Jackson continued, "When I first arrived at the shelter, I was angry and hurt. I didn't trust anyone, not even myself." He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. But Elowen saw me. She saw my pain and didn't turn away. She listened. She cared. His voice cracked slightly, but he pushed on. "She taught me that it was okay to feel, to talk about my grief." Elowen's heart swelled with emotion. She remembered those late-night talks, how Jackson had slowly opened up, sharing his fears and memories. She had always believed in him, even when he struggled to believe in himself. Jackson's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he continued, "Because of her, I found my voice. I learned to advocate for myself and others like me." He gestured to the crowd, his passion igniting their interest. "I realized that there are many young people out there, just like I was, who need support. They need someone to stand up for them." The audience listened intently, captivated by Jackson's words. Elowen could see the impact he was having. She could feel the weight of their collective struggle, yet there was a sense of hope hanging in the air. Jackson had turned his pain into purpose, and it inspired everyone around him. "Elowen taught me that hope is powerful," Jackson said, his voice stronger now, "and that compassion can change lives." He glanced back at Elowen, a smile breaking through his somber expression. "I wouldn't be standing here today if it weren't for her. She is my inspiration." The applause erupted, filling the room with warmth and appreciation. Elowen felt tears prick at her eyes. She had done her best to help, but hearing Jackson's words made her realize the true impact of her work. It had not just been about helping him, it had been about building a legacy of change. As the applause faded, Jackson took a step closer to Elowen. "I have a proposal," he said, excitement bubbling in his voice. "I want us to work together on a new initiative for at-risk youth. We can create programs that empower them, just like you empowered me." Elowen's heart raced. The idea of collaborating with Jackson filled her with a renewed sense of purpose. "I would love that," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Together, we can make a difference." Jackson beamed, and the audience erupted in cheers. Elowen felt a surge of joy and hope. This was more than just a charity event. It was the beginning of something beautiful. Together, they could create a movement of support and healing for those who needed it most. As the event continued, Elowen and Jackson exchanged ideas, their passion for helping others reigniting the connection they had formed years ago. The future felt bright, filled with possibilities. They were no longer just a nurse and a troubled teen. They were partners in a mission to bring hope to the next generation. And in that moment, Elowen knew that her promise to care had truly blossomed into a legacy of change. Elowen and Jackson stood in the large community room of the shelter, surrounded by colorful posters they had made for their new programs. The walls were adorned with drawings and messages of hope, created by the young people they aimed to help. They had spent weeks planning and preparing, and now it was time to bring their vision to life. "We're ready for this, right?" Elowen asked, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and nerves. She looked at Jackson, who had become a partner she deeply trusted. Jackson smiled, his confidence shining through. "Absolutely, we've got this. These kids need us, and we're going to make a difference." They had decided to start with a workshop focused on art and expression. Elowen believed that creativity could be a powerful tool for healing. Jackson agreed, knowing how much art had helped him when he was struggling. As the first group of young people entered the room, Jackson greeted them with enthusiasm. "Hey everyone, welcome to our art workshop. We're really excited to have you here with us." Elowen stepped forward, her warm smile inviting the teens in. "Today, we want to explore how you feel and express those feelings through art. There's no right or wrong way to create. Just let your thoughts flow. The teens exchanged glances, some looking uncertain, while others seemed curious. Elowen noticed a girl in the back, her eyes downcast, clutching a sketchbook tightly. "What's your name?" Elowen asked gently. The girl looked up, hesitating. "Lily," she whispered. "Lily, would you like to share something from your sketchbook with us?" Elowen encouraged. Lily shook her head, her voice barely audible. "I'm not good enough." Elowen knelt down to Lily's level, speaking softly. "You don't have to be good enough. This is a safe space to be yourself. We're here to support each other." Jackson chimed in. "I used to think the same way, Lily, but I learned that sharing my art helped me heal. It's not about being perfect. It's about expressing who you are." Lily looked at Jackson, her expression softening. Slowly, she opened her sketchbook and revealed a drawing of a tree with deep roots. "This is my favorite drawing," she said, her voice gaining strength. "It reminds me that I can grow, no matter how hard things get." Elowen beamed at Lily. "That's beautiful. Trees are strong and can survive through storms, just like you." As the workshop continued, Elowen and Jackson moved around the room, encouraging the young people as they created. Laughter and chatter filled the air, and Elowen felt a warmth in her heart. She watched as connections formed among the teens, each one opening up a little more. Later, as they wrapped up the session, Jackson stood before the group. "Thank you all for sharing today. Remember, you are never alone in this. We're here for you." Elowen added, "And we want to keep doing this. We have more workshops planned, and we'd love for you to join us again. Together, we can build a community of support." As the teens left, Elowen turned to Jackson, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I can't believe how well that went. They really opened up." Jackson nodded, a proud smile on his face. "It's just the beginning. We can create something special here, Elowen." Over the next few months, Elowen and Jackson worked tirelessly to expand their programs. They introduced mentorship opportunities, pairing older teens with younger ones who needed guidance. They organized group outings, where the youths could bond over fun activities, from hiking to movie nights. One afternoon, while setting up for another workshop, Elowen noticed Jackson talking with a group of teens. He was animated, sharing stories and jokes, and they laughed together. Elowen felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had found a new purpose, not just in helping others, but in healing her own heart as well. As they cleaned up after the day's activities, Jackson turned to Elowen, his voice serious. "You know, I never would have made it this far without you. You inspire me every day." Elowen felt her cheeks warm. "And you inspire me, Jackson. Together, we are making a difference. I believe we can change lives, one workshop at a time." They both knew that they were just beginning this journey. With every step, they were not only helping others, but also finding strength and hope within themselves. As they stood side by side, the future looked bright, filled with possibilities and connections that could last a lifetime. Share this story if you believe that creativity and connection can heal even the deepest wounds. Leave a comment about a time when art or expression helped you through a tough moment, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like this one.